a relatively new thing. Certainly, it's younger than the oral history, and so I guess with that in mind, I certainly remember as a university student in Dunedin going whitewater kayaking on the water of the Leith after it rained, and perhaps had I known what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. But I still did at the time, and I have very fond memories of doing it, and so.
Yeah. Okay, Roger, can I just ask this? Because you said you take out Fiordland, water quality good, take out the hilly regions good, but then you sort of made it clear that where the farming's happened, down the flatlands, we have a major problem. And I still don't seem to hear too much positive comment from people like yourselves, who are well up and qualified to discuss this, on real progress being made in the farming areas. And are we getting anywhere with this, or are we still fighting the fight against farmers and other people who don't want to do it?
Look, I think we are starting to make really fantastic progress. I've seen over the last few years a real mindset change amongst some of the community groups, particularly in Southland, where I guess you possibly could have described it as denial that there isn't a water quality issue has for the most part disappeared, and there's a much greater degree of acceptance that we need to get on and do stuff on the ground, take some action on the ground to improve water quality, and that's a big focus of the Southland Regional Council's response to water quality issues is developing and fostering action on the ground, working with landowners to develop farm environmental management plans, but equally working with our city and district councils to improve the quality of their wastewater and stormwater discharges, and large industry for that matter.
Very good to have you on, Environmental Southland, a senior environmental scientist, Roger Hodson there. Some good responses to that. What seems to be missing, someone says, in this conversation about clean rivers is kaitiakitanga, where Māori see themselves as guardians of this earth. It helps to see ourselves as passing through, but the land remains for hopefully future generations. I think it's time to hand land and water care back to Indigenous practice. Wonderful responses this afternoon. And just finally, very, very briefly, eating dinner at the table, is that what you did when you were young? A research piece from 2017 called The Family Dinner Project from the Harvard Graduate School of Education says, research shows that you got to eat at the dinner table. Sharing meals raises kids' grades, resilience, self-esteem. Round the panel, did you both have quality time at the dinner table like I did, Gary?
Yes, absolutely we did. There was a period when TV first came in where we used to do the old TV, what do they call those things? Trays?
TV dinners.
It was a tray that used to set up. Yeah, I can remember that. Tiny little nasty things with pictures of Te Anau on them and things like that. But by and large, we did the dinner table, and certainly with my kids now, they have to be at the dinner table.
They have to be? Really?
Absolutely, yep, absolutely. And
nice work, Gary.
Yeah, certainty, yeah.
How old-fashioned.
Yes, aren't I? Well, you've already talked about my looks, now you're talking about my childbearing practices.
Oh, disappointing.
No, they're both great. You've got the best face in New Zealand for radio and TV. And Catherine, you've been great too. Thank you very much. Catherine Burnett, Gary McCormick on the panel. Checkpoint next.
Lovely to be here.
Wallace Chapman, I'm back tomorrow from 3:45. See ya.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, a dodgy landlord is ordered to stump up $180,000 after failing to lodge tenants' bonds. So is she still free to keep renting out properties? You betcha. So today, we chased her down. MSD fronts up over the 11,000 families on the waiting list for a state house. A woman who was shot in the head and left for dead tells the court how she tried to stay alive by telling the shooter she was pregnant. We cross to rural Waikato, where one person is dead and 3 injured after a suspected shooting. And we're back at the Lumsden Maternity Hub. No births on the side of the road this time, but Southland women say giving birth there is Russian roulette.
New RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. The flu vaccine is being restricted due to a nationwide shortage of the medicine, as official figures show a surge in confirmed cases and the number of people in hospital. The Ministry of Health says due to high demand for the vaccine, there is now very limited stock. It says nearly 1.3 million people have had the vaccine, close to the same number as the whole of last winter. ESR figures show confirmed cases of influenza are at their highest rate for this period in recent years. Immunisation Advisory Centre Director Nikki Turner says it's disappointing there is a shortage of the vaccine and some people will miss out.
On one level, this is a good news story that New Zealand has responded very well and taken up flu vaccine very well. On the other side, we do not now probably have enough flu vaccine to offer to everybody for the rest of the flu season.
Dr. Nikki Turner. Forensic police and detectives are examining several scenes in a rural area south of Kawhia on the Waikato coast after one person was killed and 3 others suffered gunshot wounds. A car with its back window shot out is currently being examined by police outside Hauturu School. Our reporter says locals in the small farming settlement are shocked, but few had any clues as to what led to the early morning shootings. One person is being interviewed by police. Police were called to a rural address about 4 o'clock this morning after one of those hurt managed to raise the alarm and a helicopter and other emergency services were scrambled. The injured are in a moderate condition. A serial rapist has been jailed indefinitely by the Wellington High Court today, but police suspect there are more victims out there. 39-year-old Richard George Appley had pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including sexual violation, assault and possession and making of objectionable material dating back to the 1990s. Emma Hatton reports.
The head of investigations in Wairarapa, Acting Detective Senior Sergeant Hayley Ryan, says police commend the strength and bravery of the women who made complaints against Appley. Ms Ryan says without their courage he would still be in the community and could have hurt others. However, investigators believe there are more women living in the Lower North Island and in Tasman district who are yet to speak to police. Appley lived in the Wellington and Horowhenua districts through the 1990s until the present and may have also spent time in Greymouth. Ms Ryan encourages anyone with information to come forward and assures them it will be in confidence. This is Emma Hatton.
A Southland maternity centre was sent the wrong emergency equipment days after a mother gave birth in an ambulance next to a rural highway. The Lumsden Centre was downgraded to a non-birthing unit in April, despite strong community opposition. In the past 2 weeks, 2 mothers have been unable to get to a primary birthing unit in time. Clutha Southland MP Hamish Walker says the hub didn't have oxygen and full resuscitation equipment at the time of the first birth, forcing one mother to give birth beside a rural highway. And to make matters worse, he says the Lumsden hub was then sent the wrong oxygen.
After the first baby was born on the side of the road, Lumsden did receive oxygen, but what's even more alarming is the oxygen received wasn't the correct oxygen. It was 100% oxygen. If it's 100% oxygen, it can cause long-term damage to a baby.
Hamish Walker says the right oxygen has since arrived at the hub, and a midwife also says the Te Anau hub still isn't fully equipped. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says a 52-year-old man killed in the Darwin shootings was a New Zealander. He was one of 4 men shot dead after the gunman went on a rampage across Darwin CBD earlier this week before being arrested. The ministry said it was in contact with local authorities, but for privacy reasons would not be providing any further information. However, the Northern Territory Police have named him as 52-year-old Robert Courtney. He was working as a security guard at Mindil Beach Casino Resort, which says he was a valued member of their security team. Police have not given any motive for the attacks. The Northern Territory Commissioner, Rhys Kershaw, says 4 counts of murder will be laid later today.
The suspect has undergone surgery for what appears to be knife wounds that were sustained prior to him being apprehended by police. He is being formally interviewed by major crime detectives today.
Commissioner Rhys Kershaw. A High Court order preventing media from showing the face of the accused Christchurch gunman has now lapsed. Australian national Brenton Tarrant is before the High Court in Christchurch, accused of murdering 51 people and injuring dozens of others on March the 15th. Annika Smith reports.
The accused gunman's face has been pixelated in all filming or photographs taken in court. At his first court appearance, Judge Paul Culler allowed the media to film and take photos, but on the condition his face was blurred. In a minute issued this afternoon, Justice Mander says the Crown has told him this isn't needed anymore. The order has now lapsed. The accused gunman has only physically been in court once before. He appeared by audio-visual link at his second hearing. The 28-year-old is due to appear in the High Court at Christchurch on Friday next week. He will face a fresh charge laid under the Terrorism Suppression Act and another murder charge, the 51st. Ko Annika Smith aho.
It's 5:05. The sacked Wallaby star Israel Folau has launched legal proceedings against Rugby Australia over the termination of his contract. Folau, a fundamentalist Christian, was fired by Rugby Australia for a controversial social media post. The ABC's Dan Mark reports.
In April, Israel Folau posted on Instagram that homosexuals, amongst others, would go to hell unless they repented. His 4-year, multi-million-dollar contract was terminated by an independent panel. Today, Mr Folau lodged papers with the Fair Work Commission alleging his employment was ended on the basis of religious discrimination. In a statement, Mr Folau says no Australian of any faith should be fired for practising their religion. Rugby Australia is yet to respond.
Dan Mark reporting. New Zealand sits at the top of the table at the Cricket World Cup after making tough work of their second straight win at the tournament. The Black Caps beat Bangladesh by 2 wickets in a dramatic low-scoring match at the Oval in London. Chasing a modest 245 to win, New Zealand got to 160 for 2, but then lost 6 wickets in quick succession to keep Bangladesh in the game. Bowler Matt Henry, who took 4 wickets, admits they made things difficult for themselves, but they got the result they wanted. And the Toronto Raptors have gone 2-1 up in the best of 7 games at the NBA basketball finals with a 123-109 win over the Golden State Warriors in Game 3. Game 4 is on Saturday. And the New Zealand baseball player Ben Thompson has been picked up by the Atlanta Braves in the MLB draft. And that's the news.
A close call in England.
A nice sort of low to middle scoring game and a tight one with just a few balls left and a couple of wickets up New Zealand sleep.
A tornado in Northland.
We were going to get out of here. We had about 30 or 40 metres to run back to the house, and by the time we got to the door it was just howling and debris flying in all directions.
And a chilling police raid in Australia.
It is our job as journalists to hold government authorities and agencies to account, and that is why this is so important.
Holding them to account. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, nearly $2 billion has been earmarked for mental health. How should it be spent? And after 10, the crime blogger who played a key role in exposing rape culture at a US high school and the chilling documentary about it all. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now looking at the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, occasional showers turning to rain for a time early tomorrow with possible thunderstorms about coastal Northland. Strong southwesterlies. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country. Showers becoming widespread this evening. Possible thunderstorms near the west coast tonight and tomorrow morning and then gradually clearing. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa mainly fine, but showers about Wairarapa this evening and everywhere for a time tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers developing this evening, then clearing tomorrow morning. For Buller and Westland, rain with some heavy thundery falls, clearing this evening. A few showers return tomorrow evening though. Otago, Southland and Fiordland showers, some heavy with hail and snow above 600 metres, clearing inland for a time tomorrow. Westerly gales developing. And for the Chatham Islands, period of rain tomorrow morning, followed by showers. RNZ National. It is 5:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Thank you, Anna. A dodgy landlord who allegedly rented out substandard accommodation, including illegal garage conversions, has been ordered to stump up nearly $180,000 after the Tenancy Tribunal found that she knowingly failed to lodge bonds. Wadhani Iskander, also known as Debbie, has been ordered to immediately register almost $120,000 in missing bond money with the Tenancy Bond Centre. That money relates to 81 different cases. She's also been fined more than $47,000 for committing unlawful acts under the Residential Tenancies Act. I'm very familiar with Debbie Iskander's moves. In 2016, I investigated the self-described property agent and the way she was treating her tenants. Here she is explaining how she rented an illegal garage conversion that was unconsented for human habitation, had no bathroom or kitchen, for $420 a week.
It's available for $420.
$420.
Power and included electricity.
And a number of her tenants were vulnerable people on limited incomes who were desperate for a roof over their heads in the middle of a housing crisis. Debbie Iskander also rented houses, then sublet them on to multiple tenants, unbeknown to the property's owners. Once again this afternoon, I tracked Debbie Iskander down, and she told me she's going to appeal the decision.
I did the best I can at that time. I wish I knew that better, that I should just, whether people stay one day or half day, that I should lose the bond. But back then, I was just overwhelmed so much with the demand of the people that wanted to stay. And I believe at that time, if I just have a support, like administration support, to support me, I would do better. If I knew back then that the amount of people that will offer, over my capability of look after, I will hire somebody that actually can do administration better.
Right. Debbie, you had people living in illegal structures and people living in garages, and you were charging them big money for that. Did you not do something wrong there, do you think?
Lisa, you have to remember that the charge of the garage and the studio, everything is fully furnished by a brand new furniture from Harvey Norman's, from PK Furniture.
Oh, not so, Debbie. I went into some of those places. You know that. I saw the insides of a number of those garages and spoke to a number of your tenants.
Okay. Lisa, there's only one side of the story, but if you want to listen to my story, there are two sides of stories, okay? And the other thing that I have to let you know as well, that I didn't own those houses. I leased the house. So I had no idea whether the studio or the garage is legal or illegal. At that time of point, I had no idea that it has to go through city council, has to go permit, and it was the true honest. So if people wanted to at that time, I wish I knew it better, but I didn't.
Okay, so you think that it's the people who owned the property, they are responsible? Is that what you mean?
I'm taking responsibility for my side. And I did I don't want to blame anybody. I don't want to say anything bad about anyone, Lisa. The only thing that I knew, I did the best that I can to recover everything that I did wrong or mistake that I did. I look back in the time when I was doing it, why I was doing it, why I didn't ask for help, why. So anyway, it comes to the core of my heart that I knew I did the best that I can for the people back then.
So Debbie, how is your tenancy business going now?
I quit completely. And what did I do? I was just working for someone else, and I would never want to go for any business anymore.
So are you in the rental business at all, Debbie, at the moment?
I'm not doing any more property things or businesses. I'm working full time. Lisa.
Not in property? Do you have any? No, are you managing any rental properties?
No,
Debbie?
I sold. I sold everything I wanted to. I sold everything, and I didn't do any more. I didn't want to touch anything with the people that I don't want. I want to be out from the property at all, and I don't want to do anything that can cause trouble anymore like before. I really, really didn't want to do anything harm to anyone, to myself, to, anyone that I can do wrong. I don't have enough education and knowledge to
Debbie, would you like to apologise to those tenants that you didn't do a good job for?
Oh, well, I told everybody that I met when I got the paper. They told me that they knew the best that I could, but maybe I wasn't perfect. So if I wasn't perfect, of course, if I didn't do a good job, from their opinion, but I did the best I can.
The tribunal has found against you and ordered you to pay $177,000. Can you not see from that decision? Can you not see from that decision that there is some wrongdoing on your part?
Look, listen, I told you before that it's not final. So when it's final, we will see.
Do you have the money to pay what you have been ordered to pay?
I don't have, Lisa. Because the money has been returned to the people. That's the problem. If I have the money, I will return the money to them.
And that was Debbie Iskander, who has to find around $180,000 following that tenancy tribunal ruling. Now, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment investigated Debbie Iskander and says her behaviour and deception was the lowest kind of behaviour for a landlord, and Iskander willfully broke laws. I spoke to Acting General Manager of Housing and Tenancy Services, Steve Watson.
It's a really significant case because what it does is it sends a message to landlords that you can't treat your tenants like this, that you have to obey the law, and that just to behave in this way is completely unacceptable.
And how exactly was Debbie Iskander behaving here? What was she up to?
She was failing to lodge bond with the Tenancy Bond Centre. She was misleading her tenants, and she was breaching the Residential Tenancies Act in doing so.
So when you say misleading the tenants, was she doing what? Telling them that she'd lodged bond and then sticking it in her back pocket, or what was she up to exactly?
She was not lodging the bonds, and it is a legal requirement for her to lodge the bonds, and her tenants would have expected in every case that is what she did.
So in terms of the penalties here, there are some 60-plus legally binding orders as a result of this case. Can you give us a flavour of those orders?
Yes, I can. So she's required to lodge $119,625, which is bond money that she had taken from tenants. She's required to lodge that with the Tenancy Bond Centre here at MB, where we'll work out where it should be dispersed, whether it needs to be retained or whether it needs to be returned to the tenants. We'll work through that process, and it'll be a long process. In addition, she was being ordered to pay $47,600 for committing unlawful acts under the Residential Tenancies Act. That money will be divided up proportionately amongst the tenants who've been wronged through her actions, and that's by way of exemplary damages to compensate them for what's happened to them. In addition, there is an amount of approximately $11,000, which is administrative costs and tribunal and application costs that she will be required to pay back to the government.
So in terms of those bonds which she now has to lodge, has any of that money come in yet?
No, we haven't received any money as yet, and we will be following that up very soon.
That's interesting because I've spoken to Debbie Iskander and she claims that she has since lodged those bonds. So just to be clear, you have yet to receive that $119,000+.
I'm yet to see any evidence of that, and to be fair, I would need to check tomorrow morning once the banking processes have been processed. But we will be able to give you that information tomorrow.
What was her excuse in all of this?
Her excuses were numerous, and I don't have the actual files to hand, but in general, she thought that she was doing the right thing by her tenants, and she didn't see any harm in not lodging the bonds.
Did the Tenancy Tribunal find that this was willful, or was it ignorance?
The Tenancy Tribunal found that she deliberately did not lodge the bonds, and that is why they've ordered her to do so.
So how would you describe her behaviour and her as a landlord?
So her behaviour as a landlord was unprofessional and completely unacceptable to the market, the residential tenancies market. The residential tenancies market exists to provide a fair environment for both tenants and landlords, and she has behaved at the very, very lowest end of the scale in terms of what she's done.
Do you mean lowest end of the scale in terms of what you would expect as good behaviour?
Yes. In terms of the number of properties she had, she is a professional landlord, and the expectation of the ministry is that she behaves in a professional way, treats that as a proper business, and complies with all the laws and the rules and regulations that other business people who are operating in the same market have to do.
Tell me, what happens if she can't pay because she says she doesn't have the money to pay?
The judgment against her means that it is a lawful debt and therefore is enforceable through the legal debt recovery processes, and the ministry will follow that process through and try to recover the money from her through the court process or whatever other processes are open to us.
So do you know if Debbie Iskander is still acting as a landlord in any capacity? And can she?
She can act as a landlord. There is nothing prohibiting her in legislation to do so. One of the things that the compliance team will be doing is ensuring that Ms. Iskander has learned her lesson from this penalty, because that's what we are seeking to do, is seeking for her to change her behaviour if she continues to act as a landlord. We will be following up at some point in the future to check on her behaviour and to see that if she is acting as a landlord, that she is doing everything as she should in accordance with the law.
Isn't that remarkable that she can still be a landlord after this? Is there no way that can be stopped?
The law in the country, as it stands at the moment, means that she can continue to be a landlord, but what we can do is continue to monitor her behaviour and hope that she does change her behaviour and act very quickly if she doesn't.
Hope? Is that good enough, or is this a fault in the law, do you see here?
We have to deal with the law as it stands at the moment, and the current situation is that we will be monitoring her very closely and making sure that she complies with the Residential Tenancy Act as it stands at the moment.
And that is Steve Watson from MB, who's going to be keeping a close eye on Debbie Iskander, as are we. We will check in and see if she has indeed made those bond payments. It is 21 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you hear on the program today. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now, last night we brought you the story of a working Māngari family of 6, including a sick baby, who are all living in a one-bedroom private rental, while they desperately wait for a state house. Now, they are far from alone. There are more than 11,000 people or households on that waiting list for state or so-called public housing. Now, that list has doubled in size in the last 2 years. So what real hope do they have of getting across the threshold of a state house? The Ministry of Social Development is in charge of that enormous waiting list. Its Regional Commissioner, Mark Goldsmith, joins me now. Good evening, Mark. The demand there has doubled over the past 2 years. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, kia ora, Lisa, and thank you. Look, here in Auckland, we are facing quite a significant challenge within the housing market. What's causing that is, I think, quite a number of different factors. Our task is to really make sure that we are committed to helping New Zealanders and actually ensuring that we get them assistance as they need it.
So basically the system assesses people on the waiting list and the most needy go to the top of the queue. So just briefly, give us an overview. How do you rate people's need? What factors do you take into consideration?
Our system is actually a priority rated system, so it's really based on the individual circumstances. So we assess people against 5 main criteria. And so when we're sitting down and assessing this with the people, we're looking at getting into understanding their full circumstances, their affordability, adequacy, accessibility, sustainability and suitability. And again, the information that we put in our system around that generates that rating number and system.
Okay, so priority A, these are the people that need to get houses pretty quick smart. So of that waiting list, how many people waiting are so-called priority A?
Well, everyone's a priority. And it really just comes down to being able to find places that are suitable for the
But there are people, sorry to interrupt, but you know what I'm getting
That's
at
okay.
here. There are people who are a higher priority than others. This is rationing in essence. So I just want to be open about this. So priority A, which are the top priority, how many people are in that category on the waiting list?
Look, I wouldn't have that number exactly with me now because our numbers change quite rapidly.
Okay.
Again, this is a circumstance-based system, so we're encouraging people to reach out to us and let us know as circumstances change.
Right.
And as those circumstances change, so do their ratings.
Okay, so according to your most recent report that I could see on your website, 81% of people are priority A on that waiting list. And the top priority number, I understand from your PR team, is A20. So what does that look like? A person who has an A20 rating, top of the list, are they living in a car? Do they have, I don't want to make light of this, do they have terrible health problems? What does that candidate look like?
Well, because it's due to individual circumstances, then it's quite possible that you will be looking at someone who is not able to afford accommodation, but also in addition to financial situations, will potentially also have health and other conditions present. So really it is quite complex, but to get to that A20, that is someone who's in real need.
So, again, your definition, MSD's definition of a priority A applicant is that they are at risk and have a severe and persistent housing need. What does at risk mean?
Well, they're at risk, people at risk without not having safe, warm and dry shelter. Again, that's our main priority, is to ensure that New Zealanders are in safe and warm and dry accommodation. So when you're at risk, you don't have that available to you at this point.
Right, and it goes on to say that must be addressed immediately. What's the ministry's definition of immediately in terms of addressing it? What's your optimum time frame?
Look, we would love to be able to do this very, very quickly, but we're also subject to market conditions and availability. So especially here in Auckland, the market condition is absolutely tight right now.
So what's the average wait time then? Let's put it a different way. What's the average wait time?
I think, again, that can really change as well, depending on who we're talking to, Lisa. But generally we try to do our very best and get people into accommodation that's suitable quickly.
Yeah, understand that, but you have reporting requirements, and one of those is the mean and median wait times. So what is the average wait time?
So the average wait time, well, the mean at this stage is around about 107 days on average. But really, that can change quite dramatically. And it really comes down to individual circumstances, but also where people are wanting to live.
What's your
or do
target?
They actually have...
Yeah, so what's your target? If that's currently the midpoint, what are you hoping to achieve? What are you aiming for?
Look, I think it would be great if we can get people into warm, dry, safe accommodation as quickly as possible, as quickly as needed.
Do you have a number of days that you're aiming for, a target?
Not at this stage as a set target, but look, I think everyone would agree that, being able to get people in our country in a warm, safe, dry accommodation is a great thing for us to be able to do and to be able to do as quickly as we can.
Okay, I just want to very quickly address those people who are called Priority B. So their rating puts them in the B category. Can you be as honest as possible with me? What realistic chance is there of anyone on that waiting list who is a B category applicant? What chance is there for them to get into a state house when you've got 11,000 people on that list?
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible. It's definitely challenging in Auckland right now, that's being honest. But again, it comes down to circumstance. I mean, are we talking a 1, a 3 or a 5 bedroom situation? And again, location. So it's not uncommon for someone to be able to have those criteria line up and get an opportunity. So at the end of the day, we're committed to ensuring that everyone on the register is able to get into accommodation and to be able to have good shelter and that's safe, warm and dry.
I just want to quickly talk to you about the case that we highlighted yesterday. So this was a family, they have a child with meningitis. The DHB wrote a letter stating that the family's health and the health of this child was being compromised by the living conditions. How did MSD miss that letter, which was a critical part of their assessment? How did you not know about it?
Well, look, Lisa, we didn't get this right, and we are absolutely apologetic about this. We have apologised directly to the family, and they've been very gracious in accepting our apology. How this happened is really down to some human error. We did receive that letter. We just haven't acted on it as quickly as we should have, and that's something that we're really committed to getting to the bottom of and making sure we don't do that again.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Mark Goldsmith, who's from the Ministry of Social Development. They're talking about the waiting list for state houses. Some 11,000 people are on it. The tiny farming settlement of Hauturu in Waikato is in shock after a suspected shooting left one person dead and 3 injured. The police say they were called to a rural address at about 4 a.m. following a report of 4 people being found injured. Our reporter, Jordan Bond, has been in the area today and joins us now. Jordan, what can you tell us?
Well, Lisa, today there were police officers at 3 separate sites of interest. One was the local primary school, where they were looking at a silver SUV which had bullet holes in it. One area appeared to be a house on the same road, which was blocked off at the bottom of the driveway by police cars. And a road, Burnson Road, was closed off this morning with a ute, seemingly of interest, sitting at the top of it. Now, this is in a sparse farming area called Hauturu, where everyone I spoke to in the handful of houses there said it's a peaceful place and they just mind their own business. This morning at about 4 a.m, it appears 4 people were shot. It quickly became a hive of activity. Armed officers were on the scene, and one resident said it was all on this morning. A helicopter took the injured to hospital. 4 people were injured, and 1 person has since died, and the other 3 have moderate injuries. Detective Inspector Graham Pith-Kelly said the police are talking to a person who is assisting with their investigation, and the police are not seeking anyone else in relation to the incident.
Thank you, Jordan. That's Jordan Bond, who has been in that little farming settlement of Hauturu in Waikato, where there has been suspected shootings there. On Checkpoint on RNZ National, why flu jabs are being restricted so early in the season, more concerns over the state of maternity care in Southland, and 75 years on, veterans gather to commemorate the anniversary of D-Day. As always, we would love to hear from you, so do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program today. You can do that by text 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to the headlines with Anna.
The Health Ministry is restricting the flu vaccine due to a surge in cases and the number of people hospitalised with flu-related illness. The Ministry says due to high demand, there is now very limited stock. It says nearly 1.3 million people have already been vaccinated, nearly as many as for the whole of last winter. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed a New Zealander was among 4 men shot dead in Darwin this week. A woman was also injured after a gunman went on a rampage across the city on Tuesday night. The Northern Territory Police have named the New Zealander as 52-year-old Robert Courtney, who was a security guard at Mindil Beach Casino. The Wellington High Court has jailed a serial rapist for an indefinite period, and the police suspect there are more victims in the Lower North Island and Tasman district. 39-year-old Richard George Appley pleaded guilty to multiple charges dating back to the 1990s, including sexual violation and making objectionable material. The police say Appley lived in the Wellington and Horowhenua districts and may have also spent time in Greymouth. A Southland maternity centre was sent the wrong type of oxygen just days after a mother gave birth in an ambulance next to a rural highway. The Lumsden Centre was downgraded to a non-birthing unit in April, despite strong community opposition. And in the past fortnight, 2 mothers have not been able to get to a primary birthing unit in time. Primary and secondary teachers are waiting to hear the outcome of today's meeting between their unions and the government. The Post-Primary Teachers Association and the Educational Institute have held a full day of talks with the Education Ministry and the Minister, Chris Hipkins. A former landlord who's been ordered to pay nearly $180,000 for not lodging bonds says she did her best for her tenants. The Tenancy Tribunal found Widhani Iskander, also known as Debbie, failed to lodge bond money in 81 cases, adding up to nearly $120,000. RNZ has previously reported that she rented garages and single rooms for hundreds of dollars to entire families in South Auckland. And those are the headlines.
Thank you, Anna. It's Checkpoint you're listening to, and I'm Lisa Owen. And Nona Peltier has joined me in the studio to talk business. Nona, so Comvita, now this is a honey producer and exporter. They're kind of looking at their model. They're going to go splitsies or what's going on?
So they produce Manuka honey, but they have been struggling to get enough supply, and that's because of bad weather and changes to the way the regulations around it. And it's just a very capital-intensive type of activity. And that's put a lot of strain on their balance sheet. The company has made a loss, planning to make another loss in its full year. So they've decided to do a top up from the top up and down review. Their chief executive Scott Coulter has been in the job for 4 years. He's stepping down in September, and they said it's a perfect time to do this review. And they're looking at breaking the business in two, so that one part of it would be for marketing, that's their brands, and the other part would be how do we improve the supply, so investment in more hives and that kind of thing. And the market really liked that idea because they finished the day up 13%. That's a very good, strong increase. 14 cents up to $3.52 when you consider that's a company that's forecasting a loss. Not bad.
And you're also telling me that investors are getting more choice around the foreign markets and new technologies?
Yeah, so the NZX has these things called exchange-traded funds, and that's basically you can go online and you can just, invest in, say, an index of, say, major companies or minor companies or industrial companies or what have you. And the NZX decide to lift their offerings so that you can do things like invest in ethical global funds or maybe futuristic ones, companies, a collection of companies that look at robotics, artificial intelligence.
So what is this, a box-ticking exercise?
Pretty much.
Where they produce a fruit basket of the things that are in your sphere of interest? Or?
Yeah, well, exchange-traded funds have been around for a long time, but they took off in popularity because of online trading. You can now buy and sell yourself. You can just go onto the site. You don't need a broker. You can just do this yourself. And it's, the NZX brands them Smart Shares. So you can just go along to their website, look for exchange-traded funds and see what's on offer there. Quite a lot. And gaining in popularity not just here in New Zealand, but around the world too.
Interesting. So what else happening on the market today, Nona?
There's a lot of mixed emotions on the market. It's running high. Donald Trump didn't miss a beat, tweeting all about his, on again, off again Mexican trade tariffs. So it look like they're ready to go ahead with those.
It's a wonder he can fit it all in
it's
between
hard.
visiting
it's
the
hard
Queen,
to believe
etc.
He's had a lot of things to do, yeah. Anyways, never mind though. Despite it being mixed, we were up 1/3%, 31 points up. Sorry, not quite 10,000 today, 9,987. We didn't get to 10,000.
Just a whisker below.
But our Kiwi is doing pretty well, stronger against the US dollar at 66.3 US cents, 95 Australian, and 52.2 pence.
Thanks, Nona. That's Nona with our business news. The flu vaccine is being restricted due to a nationwide shortage of the medicine after a record number of jabs. Just a week into the official flu season, the Ministry of Health says nearly 1.3 million people have had the vaccine, close to the same number as the whole of last winter. It says stocks are running low and flu vaccines will now be given only to people eligible for publicly funded jabs, including the elderly, those with chronic illnesses and pregnant women. Amy Williams reports.
Official figures from ESR show the flu season has kicked off with a spike in confirmed cases and flu-related hospitalisations across the country, and 4 confirmed outbreaks, including at rest homes. The flu is much more than a common cold, and flu-related illnesses cause around 400 deaths a year in New Zealand. So far this year, 3 people, 2 adults and a child, have died from the flu in Auckland. More than 1 million people have had the flu vaccine this year, but now stocks are running low and the Ministry of Health is restricting who can receive the remaining doses. Immunisation Advisory Centre Director Dr Nikki Turner says it's disappointing there's a shortage of the vaccine and some people will miss out.
This is a real challenge for us, because obviously there are people out there who have as yet not accessed their flu vaccine. We are hoping that most people who are at high risk have already accessed flu vaccine, but the flu season has really kicked in this week. We are starting to see flu, and we would be really concerned that most people who need to be are protected.
Pharmac Operations Director Lisa Williams says it's unlikely the adult influenza vaccine, Influvac Tetra, will be restocked before the end of the season.
Demand for the influenza vaccines an international issue. Australia's also experienced really high demand this year. Unfortunately, there's no surplus stock available for us to get from Australia.
Ms Williams says Pharmac is encouraging health providers to target remaining stock at people who are most at risk, including pregnant women. The Ministry of Health says there's still some stock of the children's flu vaccine, and it has asked vaccinators to continue to target this to eligible children aged between 6 months and 2 years. Some health experts are concerned New Zealand will face a similar flu season to Australia, where it's reported 139 Australians have died from the virus so far, 3 times more than the average for this time of year. National Influenza Strategy Group member Dr Lance Jennings says similar to across the Tasman, New Zealand's flu season has started unusually early, with a number of outbreaks and a more severe dominant strain of the virus.
This year's season follows 2 relatively quiet seasons in New Zealand with very low influenza activity. So I anticipate that it will be a long influenza season, and sadly there will be some severe infections. But the best protection that people can have is to receive their seasonal influenza vaccine.
The exact extent of the flu is hard to gauge, given it's not a notifiable disease in New Zealand, meaning those diagnosing the flu are not obliged by law to report cases to local public health units. What's left of the flu vaccine in New Zealand will be available to those who need it most: pregnant women, those aged over 65, and adults and children who suffer from chronic illnesses. Dr Nikki Turner says the doses need to be carefully allocated.
So the importance at this point is making sure that we do allocate the vaccines we've got to those at highest risk. That's unfortunate for those who are well and healthy and would like the flu vaccine, but at this point we really have to change direction and make sure that the flu vaccine we've got is given to those at highest risk.
It's too late to buy more flu vaccines now, but Dr Turner says the country needs to plan ahead and secure more flu vaccines next year to prevent another shortage. For Checkpoint, this is Amy Williams.
It is about 17 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do get in touch with your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program today. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We would love to hear from you. More concerns have been raised about the state of maternity care in Southland. RNZ has been told the wrong kind of oxygen was delivered to the Lumsden Maternal and Child Hub, while the Te Anau Hub is still waiting for more equipment. It comes the day after a woman gave birth in the Lumsden Hub after she was unable to get to a primary birthing centre in time. Both hubs were meant to be up and running 7 weeks ago after the birthing unit in Lumsden was downgraded. But locals told reporter Tess Brunton that this is far from the reality.
Community midwife Nikki Peeling says giving birth in northern Southland is starting to feel like Russian roulette.
Every time you have a woman that's going to travel in labour, it's like saying, click. Oh, well, there was no bullet in that one. Click. No bullet in that one. And I know that is a very dramatic way of looking at it, but it's going to happen. Like, somebody's going to end up on the side of the road.
Nikki Peeling was called in as backup for a birth in Lumsden yesterday, but on the icy roads, she arrived after the baby was born. Only one midwife was there. Babies are only meant to be delivered at the Lumsden Maternal and Child Hub in an emergency. But Ms. Peeling says the other option would have been another roadside birth. Within a couple of hours, the baby girl and her mother were on the road to Winton Maternity Centre because they couldn't stay at the Lumsden Hub.
So we had to wrap up that little gorgeous baby who was only a few hours old, put lots of woolly layers on her, put her into her little car seat, and off they went to Winton. That's very sad that they're moving another 45 minutes down the road from where they live.
Less than a fortnight ago, another mother gave birth in an ambulance on the side of a rural highway. The Lumsden Hub wasn't equipped with oxygen and full resuscitation equipment at the time. A few days later, the hub was sent 100% pure oxygen. Ms. Peeling says they couldn't use it because pure oxygen can harm a baby if used over a prolonged period, and it was the wrong size. The right equipment has since arrived, 6 weeks after it was meant to be fully operational. And Nikki Peeling says the Tiano Hub still isn't fully equipped.
And actually the equipment's not what we need. We need somebody to be able to pick up the slack for those midwives to say, yep, I'm here. You call me, I'm here. And I can come because I get paid for it. Not relying on these poor GPs who are already on call.
While the few midwives left in the area are very capable, Ms. Peeling says they need to have backup. But there's no longer a midwife in Lumsden after the centre was downgraded.
We are very prepared. We all carry our stuff in the car. Like, women live here, they know that there's not something just round the corner. But this is now going one step further away from having that safety net underneath us. Lumsden was a safety net. It's a big safety net for a big area.
Nationals Clutha Southland MP Hamish Walker says mothers and babies are being put at risk.
So we had an incredibly dangerous situation for rural Southland mums where the emergency hubs that was promised to be set up by the 15th of April weren't actually set up until the very late May.
Hamish Walker has contacted Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern to ask what she is doing after she promised to take a look into the downgrade last month.
Well, I don't think it's fair in 2019 when rural mothers are being told by the government and the DHB to plan their births better, then travel up to 2 hours to the primary birthing unit. If we want to talk about equality for rural mums and babies, they should be able to give birth at a primary birthing unit in their communities.
In a statement, Southern District Health Board Chief Executive Chris Fleming says the system is working as intended, as the hub is equipped for rapidly progressing labour and urgent births. And he says the new primary maternity system will be reviewed to check where it can be improved. For Checkpoint, Cortez Brunton, Tane.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says a 52-year-old man killed in the Darwin shootings was a New Zealander. Northern Territory Police say Robert Courtney was one of 4 men shot dead after the gunman went on a rampage across Darwin's CBD earlier this week. Police arrested the gunman, who is expected to be charged with 4 counts of murder. The police are still searching for a motive. The ABC's Amelia Turzon has just been to the latest police briefing in Darwin.
What we know about the alleged gunman who's set to be charged is a 45-year-old man called Benjamin Glenn Hoffman. We know that he was out on parole in Darwin since January. Here's the Northern Territory Police Commissioner, Reece Kershaw, speaking just moments ago.
The suspect has undergone surgery for what appears to be knife wounds that were sustained prior to him being apprehended by police. He has been cleared fit for custody and has been transferred, as we speak now, to the Darwin Watch House. We have 4 crime scenes that are still open and being processed by crime scene examiners and ballistic experts. He is being formally interviewed by major crime detectives today. It is also anticipated that later today he will be charged with 4 counts of murder.
Now, we also know from that press conference that potentially police are investigating whether a drug dispute or a battle over a woman was at the centre of this tragic occurrence here in Darwin. The police were also asked if the alleged offender was potentially under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. The police have said that they're still doing a toxicology report, but that they think it's highly likely that methamphetamine may have been involved. There's been some incredible details coming out just this morning about what we know happened of the morning of the shootings here in Darwin. Police have said that the alleged gunman, who we know was on parole, was pulled over for speeding that morning. He was given a fine and then he was allowed to keep going. Police also believe he may have been seen in the outskirts of rural Darwin in an area called Humpty Doo a few hours later. Police say there's now also unconfirmed reports that a firearm was sighted there. Now, that was all just hours before police first got the 000 call in the city here in Darwin after people at a motel heard gunshots, and then over the next hour, as we now know, 4 people were killed at various locations as the alleged gunman drove from place to place around the city. Now, this has obviously raised a lot of questions here in Darwin about the sequence of events and if more could be done. There's also been a lot of questions over if the parole system is working and indeed if electronic monitoring systems, which the alleged gunman was under, are working as well. So we know yesterday that there'll be reviews of parole and electronic monitoring systems here in the Northern Territory, but despite that, the Attorney-General Natasha File says she has confidence in the systems here in the Territory.
Amelia Turzon in Darwin. It's been a day of poignancy and remembrance in the British city of Portsmouth and here in New Zealand. 75 years ago, more than 150,000 Allied troops set off to begin the air, sea and land attack on Normandy that ultimately led to the liberation of Nazi-occupied Western Europe. But as dozens of world leaders gathered, it was the 300 veterans, most now in their 90s, who are at the centre of today's 75th D-Day commemoration. The BBC's Rita Chakrabarti has this report on the day's events in Portsmouth.
Pomp and pageantry were on full display in Portsmouth to mark 75 years since one of the most audacious military invasions in history. Some of those who fought were also here, grandfathers or great-grandfathers now, reliving their part in a mission of supreme daring and bravery.
We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds.
Over 30,000 men were at work.
They watched the retelling of that story, the largest assault by sea, land and air in history.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months.
When British and Commonwealth troops, along with their American allies, crossed in the dark to the shores of Normandy to begin the liberation of German-occupied France.
The free men of the world are marching together to victory.
It was an act of international cooperation that led ultimately to the Allied victory against the Nazis in Europe. Among the world leaders in attendance was President Trump on the final day of his state visit. He read the words of his wartime predecessor, Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity.
It wasn't all solemnity. There was a foot-tapping boogie-woogie, part of a celebration of the cultures of the countries which fought and won.
And then his number came up and he was gone for the draft. He's in the army now.
But the focus of the day was the veterans, men like John Jenkins, Portsmouth resident and former platoon sergeant. He's now 99 and brought everyone, including the Queen, to their feet.
I was terrified. I think everyone was. You don't show it, but it's there. I look back on it as a big part of my life. It changed me in a way.
And Europe is vastly changed too, with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel looking on, part of the face of a modern-day peacetime continent. She watched her British counterpart Theresa May, in one of her last public engagements as leader of her party, read a letter from a British captain written to his wife days before being killed in Normandy.
3rd of June, 1944. My darling, this is a very difficult letter for me to write. As you know, something may happen at any moment, and I cannot tell when you will receive this. Please give my fondest love to my Anne and my Jamie. God bless and keep you all safe for me.
And that report was by the BBC's Rita Chakrabarti. Meanwhile, in Wellington, about 100 people gathered to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Among the crowd at Pukeahu National War Memorial Park were 3 veterans who took part that day. Reporter Emma Hatton and visual journalist Dom Thomas were there.
On June 6, 1944, 153,000 Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy in northern France. The largest combined naval, air and land operation in history, it marked the beginning of the end for the Second World War. Among the troops was Maurice Mayston, Spitfire pilot. Mr. Mayston flew more than 180 hours in Spitfires over occupied Europe, surviving a crash landing only 3 months before D-Day. On June 6th, he was part of a victory, helping to destroy a German Luftwaffe aircraft. He says there's only one way to describe that historic event.
Just awesome. The only word I can think of is awesome. It's something that it's a lifetime experience. You never have another one like it. And you make the best of what you get.
Mr. Mayston doesn't talk about what he saw or felt during that mission, but it's something that never leaves him.
Those sort of memories will come to me when I'm not ready for them, and they'll flash in my brain rather than in my sight or any other way. They'll be in here, and I just make the best of what I get.
What he does remember is the camaraderie and friendships forged.
I've still got that memory of the company we had together when we were together, and I'm so glad I had that experience. That's all I can say.
Another veteran, pilot Philip Stewart, made the visit today from Christchurch. He recalls what the day was like.
The crowd was so low, we really couldn't do anything very much. And our brief then was to go behind as far in as we could and to destroy anything that was moving on the rail or on the road. On the road, we knew it wouldn't be French because there was no petrol for the French, of course. So that was our role, and that's what we did.
Another veteran, Roy Brooks, along with Mr. Stewart, laid a wreath on behalf of all who fought. Mr. Brooks was a radar operator on board the vessel Undaunted on D-Day. Undaunted engaged in gunfire during the landings and became General Eisenhower's vessel when the ship he was on was damaged. Chief of the Defence Force, Air Marshal Kevin Short, says ceremonies such as today's remain hugely relevant 75 years on.
Because it's about people who are giving their lives to make us have the lifestyle we want. And it's not that long ago. I mean, my grandfather serving as an example in World War II. And unless we remember the sacrifices and the efforts, I think we would move forward in the world thinking everything was fine.
The Defence and Veterans Minister Ron Mark also addressed the crowd, thanking the veterans for what they had done and reminding others to never forget it. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
And if you were just listening to that item, you can go back and look at it on our webpage or Facebook page. That was from Emma Hatton and Dom Thomas there. Bit of time for your feedback on our earlier story about the landlord Debbie Iskander, who has been ordered to come up with $180,000 after the Tenancy Tribunal found that she knowingly failed to lodge bonds. Some of that's going back into bonds and some of that is for compensation for tenants. This from Catherine Withers, who is the president of the Property Managers Institute of New Zealand. Sorry, Karen. Karen has got in touch to say, surely this case only confirms the case for landlord licensing. This landlord should be struck off from being allowed to be a landlord so no other tenants are affected by her fraudulent actions. Happy to discuss this with you. Thanks for getting in touch, Karen. Al has said, the rental lady is a confidence trickster. You can hear it in her voice. She has all the traits. Debbie, this person, John, says, if Debbie had been doing the best for the people she was helping, she would have been charging just to cover the cost, not market rate. And this one, New Zealand desperately needs to start regulating the tenancy market, maybe even requiring professional landlords to be licensed. Even if only a few landlords disregard tenants' rights completely, a great number are still exploiting tenants. My husband and I are trained lawyers but had to rent for a year off acquaintances and found we were overcharged for a cold damp house. Electrical, plumbing and gas issues, malfunctioning appliances were not satisfactorily addressed. Tenants in New Zealand are terribly vulnerable. The health, financial and social welfare of tenants are suffering to the disadvantage of us all. And this person says, truly hard to believe that landlord literally gets away with her dealings there. However, Virginia thinks I was a bit rough on Debbie Iskander. She says she's listening to Checkpoint. Obviously, this woman was taken to court as her actions are illegal. And she says, I don't condone that, but I do object to the interview done where her details are publicised. That was actually a tribunal finding that we publicised. And she says, Lisa Owen is very aggressive, unnecessarily pushy. Thanks, Virginia.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The flu vaccine is being restricted due to a nationwide shortage of the medicine as official figures show a surge in confirmed cases and the number of people in hospital. The Ministry of Health says due to high demand for the vaccine, there is now very limited stock. Amy Williams reports.
The ministry says nearly 1.3 million people have had the vaccine, close to the same number as the whole of last winter. It's advising GPs and pharmacists to vaccinate only those who are eligible for publicly funded vaccines. ESR figures show confirmed cases of influenza are at their highest rate for this period in recent years. Immunisation Advisory Centre Director Nikki Turner says it's disappointing there's a shortage of the vaccine and some people will miss out. She says the remaining doses will need to be carefully allocated. Health authorities are advising people to stay at home if they feel unwell. This is Amy Williams.
Forensic police and detectives are examining several scenes in a rural area south of Kawhia in Waikato after one person was killed and 3 others were shot. A car with its back window shot out is currently being examined by police outside Hauturu School. One person is being interviewed by police. The injured are in a moderate condition. RNZ reporter Jordan Bond is there.
Now, this is in a sparse farming area called Hauturu, where everyone I spoke to in the handful of houses there said it's a peaceful place and they just mind their own business. This morning at about 4 a.m, it appears 4 people were shot. It quickly became a hive of activity. Armed officers were on the scene and one resident said it was all on this morning.
Reporter Jordan Bond. A former landlord who's been ordered to pay nearly $180,000 for deliberately not lodging tenancy bonds says she did the best she could for tenants. The Tenancy Tribunal found Withani Iskander, also known as Debbie, failed to lodge bond money in 81 cases, adding up to nearly $120,000. RNZ has previously reported that she rented out garages and single rooms to entire families in South Auckland, charging hundreds of dollars. Ms Iskander told Checkpoint that she no longer manages properties.
I look back in the time when I was doing it, why I didn't ask for help, why. So anyway, it comes to the core of my heart that I knew I did the best I can for the people back then.
Debbie Iskander says she doesn't have the money to pay the fine. As well as the unlodged bond money, the tribunal also ordered her to pay about $48,000 for committing unlawful acts and more than $10,000 in legal costs. Primary and secondary teachers are waiting to hear if a full day of talks has broken the deadlock between their unions and the government. The Post-Primary Teachers Association and the Educational Institute have been meeting with the Education Ministry and the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins. Mr Hipkins called the meeting because the union's members are refusing to accept government offers costed at $1.2 billion over 4 years. He says the government will not add more money to the deals and it needs more time to meet teachers' demands around improved workloads and conditions. The Chief of Defence says decades after historic wars have ended, remembering them remains hugely relevant. Today marks 75 years since the Normandy landing in France, also known as D-Day. A ceremony was held at Pukeahu War Memorial in Wellington, with 3 D-Day veterans there. Air Marshal Kevin Short says the sacrifices made by those who fought and their families need to be remembered.
Because it's about people who are giving their lives to make us have the lifestyle we want. And it's not that long ago. I mean, my grandfather serving as an example in World War II. And unless we remember the sacrifices and the efforts, I think we would move forward in the world thinking everything was fine.
Air Marshal Kevin Short. A man killed in the Darwin shootings was a New Zealand national. 4 men were shot dead and a woman wounded after a gunman went on a rampage across Darwin CBD on Tuesday before police stopped and arrested him. The Northern Territory Police have named him as 52-year-old Robert Courtney. He was working as a security guard at Mindle Beach Casino Resort, which says he was a valued member of their security team. The soft toys left by members of the public outside Christchurch mosques and at the Memorial Wall have been given away to children in the city. It was done this morning as part of the Eid al-Fitr celebration at Pioneer Stadium, where 1,500 Muslims gathered to mark the end of Ramadan. The toys sat alongside the thousands of bouquets left in memory of the 51 victims of the mosque attacks. They were gathered up by the Christchurch City Council, which laundered them and gave them out today. After 30 days of fasting, Muslims have spent today visiting friends and relatives and paying their respects to the dead. It's 6:05. New Zealand sits at the top of the table at the Cricket World Cup after making tough work on their second straight win at the tournament. The Black Caps beat Bangladesh by 2 wickets in a dramatic low-scoring match at the Oval in London. Chasing a modest 245 to win, New Zealand got to 160 for 2, but then lost 6 wickets in quick succession to keep Bangladesh in the game. Matt Henry, who took 4 wickets, admits they made things difficult for themselves before finally reaching their target with 17 balls to spare.
It's obviously not ideal losing as many wickets as we did, but they're allowed to bowl well as well, and when they got a couple of wickets like that, they really could put the squeeze on, and I thought they did that really well. They obviously identified that if they could dry up runs and put a bit of pressure on, then anything can happen, and they obviously did that well, but we managed to put the partnerships together that we needed to get across the line.
New Zealand's next game is against Afghanistan on Sunday. Sacked Wallabies star Israel Folau has launched legal proceedings against Rugby Australia over the termination of his contract. Folau, a fundamentalist Christian, was sacked by Rugby Australia for a controversial social media post that said hell awaited drunks, homosexuals and adulterers and other groups. Folau wants Australia's Fair Work Commission and Industrial Relations Tribunal to rule that his employment was terminated because of his religion. In a statement, Folau said no Australian of any faith should be fired for practising their religion. The Toronto Raptors have gone 2-1 up in the best-of-7 game NBA basketball finals with a 123-109 win over the Golden State Warriors in Game 3. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Brian Crump is back in the hot seat. He's chatting with one of his younger fans, YouTuber Charlie Cuff from Nelson, who's just built his own computer. Plus, a successful effort to create a new seabird colony in our changing world with Alison Balance. And our overseas correspondent William Yang makes his debut appearance on the show from Taipei. That's Nights with Brian Crump, tonight from 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, occasional showers, turning to rain for a time early tomorrow with possible thunderstorms about coastal Northland, strong southwesterlies. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country, showers becoming widespread this evening. Possible thunderstorms near the west coast tonight and tomorrow morning, then gradually clearing tomorrow. For the Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mainly fine, but showers about Wairarapa this evening and everywhere for a time tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers developing this evening, then clearing tomorrow morning. Buller and Western, rain with some heavy thundery falls, clearing this evening, and a few showers return tomorrow night. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy with hail and snow above 600 metres, clearing inland for a time tomorrow. Westerly gales developing also tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, a period of rain tomorrow morning, followed by showers. RNZ National, it is 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Thank you, Anna. And an all-day meeting today between the teachers' unions and the Education Minister has been underway, but neither party will say what, if anything, has been accomplished. Chris Hipkins called the meeting following last week's mega strike by nearly 50,000 primary and secondary school teachers. The Teachers and Education Ministry are at a standoff over an offer that would give most teachers 3 pay rises of 3%, as well as a new step on the pay scale for primary teachers. But with no solution in sight and further disruption to classrooms with rolling strikes, some teachers say the unions are going about things the wrong way and they're fed up. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Munro filed this report.
The classrooms at Auckland's Ormiston Junior College are buzzing. Jan Ubels is teaching this class to make masks for the upcoming Lion King production. It's not a place Jan thought he'd ever be after leaving the profession 13 years ago, vowing to never return.
If you left or you were going to be, the attitude was, well, you can be replaced. And I just felt I wasn't valued at all. So why bother?
He had 17 years teaching experience, dipping in and out of classrooms over 35 years, but was sick of it.
We taught kids like how we went to school was, turn to page 27 and there'll be a test on Friday when you get to page 42, and if you don't know it, you're thick ass, it's your problem.
After losing his job making sets for the opera several years ago, Jan was looking for work again, and seeing how things were done at Ormiston Junior College, he thought he'd give it another crack.
The approach to education here is so different. Knowledge now can just be found on a machine. You just need to push the button and Google tells you, and so that's we don't need to teach knowledge anymore. What we have to do is teach how to analyse or how to question that answer.
And that approach to learning in a more holistic and supportive environment suits Jan down to a T.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, every day, I'm here shortly after 7 and I leave till I get tired, which is can be 6 o'clock.
He struggles with paperwork but has colleagues to help him with that, and he helps them out with things they need an extra hand with.
Oh, I guess it's like any teacher, you get those moments with the kids and their eyes light up. But I am also, I feel like my gifting is being used.
Ormiston Junior College has only been open 3 years and most of the 470 students are from immigrant families. Many of them speak English as their second language and the year groups are mixed so they learn to work together. It's growing incredibly quickly with a roll of 1,000 students expected in the next few years. The school's leader of learning, or principal, Luke Summage, says it's a fantastic place.
So I drive to work with a skip in my step. I don't know what I get paid. My wife checks the money, she spends it quick as I can earn it. I think 29 years I've never checked to see how much I'm getting. I love the job and I can't wait to get here, and I can't believe I'm being paid to do something that means so much.
Luke admits everyone's situation is different, with many people struggling.
Not every day is a great day. You come to do your best every day, and some days the dog and some days the lamppost.
And he acknowledges teacher pay is definitely a challenge.
We support the push for a little bit more pay, but not everyone's a union member.
Jan Ubels is one of the teachers who isn't striking, but on his current salary of $74,000, he agrees some things need to change.
Well, the pay is a shocker, I think I'm getting paid now basically the same as what I left, and that was in 2006. So there's been no pay rise over that time, which is a shocking thing, When I first started, we were getting the same as backbenchers.
But he's sick of the way the unions are managing the situation.
I just think the union take so much money of us and have achieved so little. I think it's appalling. The rolling strikes actually are a nuisance for the parents, and we are actually, our beef is with the governments, not with the parents. So I think that's tactically dumb.
Jan Ubels wasn't paying any attention to today's meeting between the unions and the government.
I support what we're going for. I do not support the union. I think they're an embarrassment, really.
Instead, he was focusing on his students and the job he loves, in the hope that one day soon his pay will reflect the effort he puts in. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And you can watch Nita and Nick's piece up online. It'll be on our webpage or our Facebook page. And in the last half hour, we've got a statement from the Education Minister saying constructive progress was made in today's talks. The statement says none of the parties are likely to be in a position to say anything more until the middle of next week. A woman whose husband was shot dead has described how she was shot in the head and told a gunman she was pregnant to try and spare her life. Abraham Tuuhiava was found dead, and his wife Yolanda, also known as Mele, was severely wounded on Greenwood Road in Mangere in May 1st last year. One man, Viliama Tane, has pleaded guilty to murder and attempted murder, while two others, Fisilau Tapai Valu and Mesuui Tuifua, deny the charges and are on trial in the High Court in Auckland. Our reporter Tom Furley was there.
Giving evidence today via video link, Yolanda Tuuhiava described to the court the night she was shot multiple times. She still has a bullet lodged in her brain. She said her husband drove them to Greenwood Road for what is believed to be a drug deal, having earlier that day met men near a McDonald's. They pulled over and parked on the side of the road, and after a while another car pulled in and parked behind them. Her husband got out and spoke and laughed with the man while she played a game on her phone. Then the night took a sinister turn.
I heard someone screaming. Someone screaming my name. I heard someone scream my name. Mele, Mele, Mele.
From inside the car, she could see what she described as the main guy, standing with a gun pointed towards her husband. And when she jumped out, she saw another man holding a gun.
I was looking directly at his eyes and I said, "Please don't, I'm pregnant." Just in hopes that he had a heart, like he wasn't gonna shoot me.
Mrs. Tuuhiava said they tried to escape, running down the street and hiding behind a tree. The men followed them in their car and told them to come out. She knelt before them, then was shot.
All I remember hearing was just bang, and my arm fell. And I knew something was wrong because when I was trying to get it up, it wouldn't move, like it felt like my hand went swollen or something.
She was shot in the arm again and said she fell to her side and pretended to be dead. From there, she said she could see her husband kneeling, but he soon made a run for their car.
Like that's the last time I saw my life. Like he was running, and then all I could hear was like bang, 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 and he ran like this, and he goes ah, and then he went forward, sliding on the ground, and that was it. That was it for my husband.
She said she got up and went towards him, but was shot again, this time in the head.
My legs held me up. I don't know why my legs would have just let me fall. And I could remember, I was like I forgot how to breathe. And then I heard another ding. Then I knew I got shot in the head again.
Eventually, she said she fell and stayed still until the men left in their car. She said she was able to drag herself closer to the side of the road where motorists could see her. A motorist spotted her hours later and alerted emergency services, and she was taken to hospital. Misui Tafui's lawyer, Paul Borich QC, began his cross-examination of Mrs. Tu'uhiava this afternoon. He put to her that she knew her husband was a drug dealer but had withheld some details from police, something she denied, saying he had never told her directly. Throughout the 2 days of giving evidence, Mrs. Tu'uhiava has appeared to struggle to remember some things and has required frequent breaks. When asked whether parts of the actual night had disappeared from her memory, she said she remembered most of it. Mr. Borich also suggested some of the things she had read or heard in the aftermath may have affected her memory. She said she didn't think it would have. The trial continues. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
It's 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A Christchurch housing trust says hundreds of people are waiting for social housing but can't use empty temporary homes originally set up for quake victims. The Linwood Park homes were set up in 2011 for those waiting on earthquake repairs and are now half empty and available until 2021. But the village manager says she's frustrated that those on the social housing waiting list aren't allowed to move in. Rachel Graham has more.
The Linwood village was set up in 2011 when hundreds of people's earthquake-damaged homes were being rebuilt and they needed a short-term place to stay. The temporary homes are still available for another 2 years, but only half of them are currently used for their original purpose. The chief executive of the Otatahi Community Housing Trust, Kate Kearney, says it's frustrating that the law effectively stops those seeking social housing from using them.
Ideally, my team would say, look, we want to put people permanently into ours rather than put them in temporary housing. But the need is great at the moment, and we have 2 3-bedroom homes sitting there that could be used for social housing.
829 people are currently sitting on the Ministry of Social Development's waiting list for social housing. And Ms Kearney says the Linwood homes would be good, quality, warm homes which could ease some of that pressure. The homes were set up under MSD, but are now controlled by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. Ms Kearney says she's communicated with both ministries, but is none the wiser about how to bring about a change in use. The chair of the council's housing subcommittee, Glenn Livingston, says he supports the move and will push council to apply some pressure on the government.
I think we need to look at all options, given the growing waiting list for social housing and the fact that social housing is one step up from homelessness. So, yeah, fully supportive of the trust to get people in there, and I think we need to find a way to cut through some red tape here and just to get people in.
Kate Kearney says she's also sought help from local MP Duncan Webb, but he won't commit his support. He says he'd like the houses to be used as much as possible, but there's a social contract in place.
I absolutely understand that if there's houses that are vacant there and across the road there's people that need houses, we want to meet that gap. We've also got to recognise that, you know, the kind of deal that was struck with the community was that you can use a park for houses that are needed for earthquake relief. So I don't want to go kind of breaking that social contract either.
Mr Webb says he wants to speak to the local community and hear their views first, but a law change might not be needed to solve the impasse. He says a new agreement between the Housing Trust and the Council might be a quicker way to get cold families into the warm but empty homes. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
The government has backed off radical changes to the rules that forced Fonterra to take milk from any new dairy farms. In the first review of the rules in 18 years, Fonterra will be able to refuse milk from new suppliers under certain circumstances. It will also extend Fonterra's right to refuse milk from polluting farmers. Eric Frickberg reports.
Fonterra and its 11,000 farmer shareholders have had to obey strict rules since 2001. The reasoning? They were so big that they could easily exploit their market dominance, and so they had to be watched closely. The Minister of Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, has now given Fonterra a little more leeway, including not having to buy milk from new dairy startups, whose milk they don't want but still had to buy.
This change means that they don't have to invest where they don't see the sense in building new capacity. So new conversions will not automatically get a right of entry into Fonterra's system.
This was one of Fonterra's main bugbears. The law meant almost anyone could set up a dairy farm, and the co-op had to buy their milk, incurring huge fixed costs in an industry that needed flexibility. The Fonterra Shareholders Council, which represents the farmer suppliers, says this review has missed a good opportunity for change. Board member John Stevenson says new dairy farms might find Fonterra's front door shut, but existing farms could still knock on that door and be likely to get a sale, and that's a burden on the company.
We need to take our milk and we need to ship it to the other side of the world, and our farmers expect us to be able to sell that milk for more than our competitors. So that comes to our brand, and when we have to take, I suppose, all milk, that really doesn't lend itself to achieving our goals as farmers, our goals as a co-op, or even our government's goals in terms of shifting to a higher value economy.
Two changes proposed by the government do win some support. They give Fonterra the right to reject milk on environmental grounds or if labour or animal welfare standards fall short. But a huge negative is Fonterra's continuing obligation to sell milk to its rivals, subject to amended conditions. Fonterra's chairman, John Monaghan, says that might have made sense 2 decades ago, but now dairy companies compete with each other happily, and they don't need a helping hand via milk sold at cost from Fonterra.
Our farmers' milk is sold at cost to largely foreign-owned competitors who then use that milk to compete with us in the market. And the disappointing part of that is really none of that profit comes back to New Zealand. All our profit is spent in regional New Zealand and enhances the New Zealand economy.
Annabeth Cohen of Forest and Bird hopes the changes will stop the spread of dairy farms from making a bad environmental problem still worse.
Had something like this been in place ages ago, we might not have seen so much destruction. What we're hoping is that this will mean that Fonterra will set rigorous criteria for better environmental outcomes, lifting the game across the industry.
Legislation to implement these changes should get its first reading in about a month. Ko Eric Frickberg, Tene.
And Muslims around New Zealand gathered at gymnasiums and halls this morning for prayers and a bite to eat as they marked the end of Ramadan. After 30 days of fasting between sunrise and sunset, Muslims spent today's feast, known as Eid al-Fitr, visiting friends and relatives and paying their respects to the dead. In Christchurch, where 51 Muslims lost their lives in the March 15 terror attack, the feast is especially poignant. Conan Young visited Pioneer Stadium where about 1,500 came together to mark one of the biggest days on the Muslim calendar.
It's close to 0 degrees in Christchurch, with the freezing cold biting at your fingers and toes. But the hugs and smiles inside the gym at Pioneer Stadium are providing a contrasting warmth. No sign here of the hurt these people have experienced and felt since the events of March 15. Community leader and one of those inside the Al Noor Mosque at the time of the shootings, Sardar Faisal Abbas, says today is a true celebration of life. He's surprised by the large turnout.
First I thought that it might not be that much, like people will try to avoid it. But no, when I came in here, there were a lot of people, and I think they're around 1,500, which is a good number. And obviously, even after that incident, you can see everyone is smiling, everyone is laughing, trying to greet everyone, which is really good, which is really, really good.
Faisal says there's been mixed emotions for Muslims observing the holy month as the reality hits home that close family members are no longer there for important moments.
Positives are that at least people are with you in this time of the year and they are supporting you, which is really good. But on the other side, it's like because the seats are empty when you're breaking fast, you don't see the person that was there last year, but he or she is not there anymore this year. So it was hard on the families.
He says attending the mosque each night where horrific events occurred has been a hard but necessary part of the healing process.
The first 2-3 times it was really hard, like I won't be able to sit there for more than 5-10 minutes because obviously you think about it, you hear the bullets and everything. But as I said, things like these takes time, and it will be easier as you go to the mosque more frequently. Like this was a very good Ramadan was very good in a way that everyone would meet at 7 p.m. every night for the Taraweeh prayer, which was good because you were there, you were talking to people, and kind of it helps you get over it.
Another community leader, Tony Green, says the wounds from March the 15th will take a long time to heal, and not all wounds can be seen.
We are very, very mindful of the fact that amongst us we have people who are stressed. They talk about PTSD, but there's stress is there, it's a real thing. So there's a lot of work still to be done.
And you can see some of the people who are sitting in chairs, who are on walking frames. I mean, these people are people who've been injured from the attacks, isn't it?
These are the obvious ones. There are people who are not here who have now got lifelong injuries, and they're amongst us. They've got quite severe wounds, and obviously those others who will have for the rest of their life. Hopefully these people will recover to some degree of normality, but there are others who won't. Their lives are completely changed.
He says at times like this, people's faith helps them to get through.
And whenever you hear about a discomfort or a death or something, we say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, from the one we come and to him is our return. We come from God and to God we return. So that acceptance of death, the inevitability of death, and the purpose of life, that life has a purpose, it's not some flickering, flippant kind of thing, that's behind it all. So insofar as it gives you a kind of a framework for resilience, that perhaps is there. You know, that passing is not something where you beat your breast and just why.
Looking around at the scene of pure joy that surrounds us following the end of prayers, Tony Green pays tribute to the resilience of the Muslim community in Christchurch.
Obviously, after March the 15th, this is quite unique, sadly unique, but it's a beautiful thing that we come to this, and at the same time, you can't forget the people who passed on. They're in our minds, they're in our minds and our hearts.
Many soft toys and gifts were left at the gates of the Al Noor Mosque and the memorial wall following the attack. They were collected and were distributed today to children at the festival. A small gesture from the city to remind these people that they are not alone. Kei o te tahi aho, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Konanyang tēnei.
Let's get to some of your feedback around the MSD interview that we did about the 11,000 people who are on the waiting list for state housing. This person says, I was told over 3 years ago that I was at the top of the list and I am still waiting in Christchurch and unsafe, and I do not believe Mr Goldsmith is being honest. That's Mark Goldsmith from MSD. And this person says there is one problem. Too many people keep having more children when they don't have the ability to get homes or support the growing family. Is contraception free to low-income families? And this one from David, who says the system is broken. I have a family member in a wheelchair with mental health complications. They presented to WINS for housing, explaining they were about to lose their accommodation. Now, David says they were told to come back when they had no home at all, and they would be put in a motel at their own cost. And this last one, that I'm not as bad or as scary as Mary. Thank you.
RNZ News headlines. The Immunisation Advisory Centre says remaining doses of the flu vaccine will have to be carefully allocated after a higher than expected uptake. Forensic police and detectives in Waikato are examining a rural area south of Kawhia after a shooting in which one person was killed and 3 others injured. A High Court order which stopped media showing the face of the accused Christchurch mosque gunman has lapsed and his image no longer has to be pixelated. The Social Development Ministry says it's facing significant challenges in reducing the growing waiting list for state housing. And a just-released statement from the Education Minister says constructive progress was made in today's teacher pay talks, but there will be no further statement until the middle of next week. Our next news and weather at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.